This video is going to show you Solar Flawless Warlords Ruin on a Titan. First, we're going to see that and skip to the timestamps. So the first thing that you want to prep, there's two things that you want to prep. Your artifact. So these are the mods that I had on. Make sure you've got this one on because this increases ability damage and stuff. But mainly I'm focusing on, obviously, solar mods because I'm using a solar subclass. And obviously solar operator. Right, so that's my artifact mods. Step 2 is to prep your loadouts in orbit before you start the dungeon. Doesn't matter if you know what you're doing in the dungeon. Still prep all this stuff while you're in orbit. Don't be doing it in the run. Alright? So there's 3 bosses, and 3 bosses, each boss demands slightly different things of you, I believe. So there's 3 different builds with a surge switch in each build, right, to complement it. So for the first boss, we're using Dragon's Breath, Solar Hand Cannon, Strand Fusion. We then switch to our surge switching, right, with Paragil Gauntlet. So this is a Burn and Maul loadout for DPS, right, with Dragon's Breath. So it's obviously got to be Burn and Maul, unless the Paragil Gauntlets won't work, obviously. Let me just quickly explain how surge switching works, because people are still confused on this and they don't really understand it. You can store armor charges as long as you don't have a mod that decays the armor charges. A mod that's yellow or something, like Healthy Finish, is really good. Utility Kickstart will be terrible for this because you want to use your class ability and then you end up losing your armor charges. So Healthy Finish is the way to go with this, right? So I went with Healthy Finisher. When you go to your surge switch, your boots change, right? So I had scav mods on, and then it goes to double solar surge and a strand surge because it's matched from weapon types. So, and last thing is that there's an elemental time dilation which increases armor charge duration, which isn't needed that much, but I just like to put it on anyways. It is needed for, I think, for boss 2, the ogre boss. So this is the same build as that, as what I've just explained, although the hand cannon's slightly different, which I'll go into more in detail in the run about all this stuff. It's the same setup as what you saw, right? It's the same thing as what I just explained above. The final boss, however, is slightly different because we've been using Burn and Maul with Paragil Gauntlets, right? But the final boss, for obvious reasons, would be immune to your Burn and Maul super. Not immune in that sense, but he's a floating target, no good. So we need to use regular Hammer of Sol, which therefore you use Symphoceps for the buff, right? So that's what we end up using for the final boss fight. And we use an Anarchy with a Kinetic Sniper. And you're going to see how good this is. This isn't a troll. You're going to see how good this is for the final boss fight. And I'm going to explain it to you why Dragon's Breath isn't quite as good as Anarchy for the final boss fight, in my opinion. And I'll go through all that. And each encounter, I suppose. But Dragon's Breath is better for the Ogre fight. It's probably the best in slot for the Ogre fight. For the first boss fight, it's whatever because it's so quick. But that's going over all that. So for the purpose of the video, we're going to cut out the traversal sections, as this is a video for people who have already experienced the dungeon. They know what they're doing with the traversal section. They just want extra tips for the solar flaws. That is it. So obviously this is for Titan mains. And it's just going to include the 4 main encounters. Well, 3 main encounters plus 1 side encounter that you get. So for the first boss fight, this boss fight is a burst damage style thing, right? You don't get a lot of time to do DPS, and you get to damage really quickly. So the mechanics are, you get an ad wave, right? Shortly after you get teleported to a cage, you shoot 2 free blights. You then get out of the cage and then try and collect the Scorn Trap. Now, chances are you might get bad RNG and you might not be able to collect both traps. This will cost you damage, which, what I've just said, it doesn't really matter for this boss fight. So if you can only manage to capture 1 Scorn Trap for the DPS wave, it is going to cost you damage, but it isn't going to cost you too much time, because this boss fight can be done in less than 10 minutes, no problem. 7, 8 minutes tops. No matter how bad your damage is, it doesn't really matter. So you're not punished. That damage right there wasn't that good, by the way. So there's going to be times when that might happen. And it's RNG, this fight, with where the boss puts his traps. I don't see any way of controlling him on doing that, right? Because if the traps overlap, the 2 Scorn traps, then it's easy win for you to cap him. If they're spread out, depends on how far they're spread out. It just means you're going to lose a couple of seconds of damage if that ends up happening. With the blights, make sure that you shoot them as quickly as you can. This will give you success at getting the scorn traps in time, because by the time the imminent wish timer runs out, you know, if you're getting to there less than 15 seconds or something, you're not capturing both traps unless you get good RNG. So, you know, make sure that you're shooting those blights pretty quick. Obviously, we've got Symphoceps on. We're on a Sunspot Titan, so make use of your melee hammer and stuff. So for DPS, how it should start for this, because of Revitalize and Blast. First, start with your thrown hammer, right? Then use Dragon's Breath, and then depending whether you have super or you don't, right? You would super first, but if you don't have super, say it's phase 2 or phase 3 or whatever, then just focus on the fusion rifle damage, which will be best in slot for you to use this. This fusion, as I've said in the past, I haven't still crafted this scatter signal yet. So I am using a stock loadout one with control burst at the very least. So just bear that in mind. I'm not using the perfect one, but I'm still doing more than enough damage than what I would need, because of all the mods that we have this season. Obviously, once you take Solo Operator out of the equation and Revitalize and Blast and stuff, right, my weapons matter a lot more at that point. But right now they don't matter too much. So I have started to work on getting red weapons, but I'm not getting many scatter signals. I might use deep sight harmonizers, but I'm in no rush to do that. It's a long season and stuff, so you know, I'm not too fussed. But for the video, my scatter signal works fine. It's a control burst fusion in the kinetic slot. It's OP as it is anyways. So like I say, I always debuff with the hammer first, right? But this is the danger for this is Dragon's Breath will kill you if you're too close. So debuff with hammer first, then Dragon's Breath. Don't Dragon's Breath, then go with the hammer, because you're then going to probably kill yourself, right? And if you do it, then you know, you just time it, try and time it. But you should be only debuffing once, twice maximum per DPS phase, anyways, on this boss fight, right? It's not critical. Honestly, this boss fight is really just to teach you for the rest of the dungeon. I don't find it very satisfying to run, and I'll tell you why. Because of the boss. I was doing it the other day there, and he wasn't even putting up 2 traps. He was putting up 1 trap and then the second trap at the very last second. Like, I would cap the first scorn trap and then he would just put up the second one. I was like, what is this? So there's no like routine with it. I don't like it. I prefer the second boss fight and the third boss fight especially much more than this one. But props to them for doing 3 boss fights in a dungeon. So I'll take that. Make sure that you take down these Scorn Ravagers, the one that come at you with the melee damage, because they can melt you, right? So make sure that, you know, that you're using your hammer against them to debuff them and what have you. We got our super just at the end here. This was actually a decent kill. So obviously we're swapping between Pyrogale Gauntlets and Symphoceps, right? And you see that it does really good damage. I haven't really showcased how good it is, really, until the ogre fight. That's where you'll see where it'll come into its own. So with the jail cell, whatever number you get is the number that you need anti-clockwise. So if there's 3, 4, that means you need 4 anti-clockwise, and then the 6 dials total, that remains as 2. That means 2 will be clockwise. So the best RNG is 1, because 1 would mean 1 anti-clockwise and 5 clockwise, because anti-clockwise takes 3 shots and clockwise takes 1. I feel as though most people know the strat on this. It's really straightforward. I know when it first launched it was confusing, but right now it's a really simple thing. Like, if you don't understand this, then just comment and ask somebody or me or whatever, and we can explain it to you in another way. But it's really straightforward. So just shoot your combination, shoot the lock, and then you're done. Right? Then there's a maze after this, but as I said, I'm not including traversal sections in this video. So now we're on to the boss fight. The first proper boss fight, I would say, right? So I've done this similar to how I've done the Warlock run, I suppose. Well, it is very similar actually. So if you saw that run and you're not really interested in this run, then I understand. But as I say, I want you to get a Titan run done while Titan's OP at the minute. There are other builds of doing this with the Strand Titan. I'm just not fond of using the trace rifle to make a tangle point and then do DPS that way. It's just kind of like, what are we playing, Tekken? What is this game like? So I'm not really into that, really, in terms of me playing that and showing you it and doing all that stuff. I know that is the speedrun strat because you can solo one-phase bosses and stuff. I'm just saying for the average player, the skill ceiling on that is rather high for them to do it. So for now, like I say, I'm just going to, show this solo run, for now, and then maybe do a run with no solo operator, etc. So there's steps that you need to take. There's a lot of routine with this boss, and I do like it because if you follow the steps, you follow the routine, then you get it done, no problem, generally. So it's the same mechanics as what we had before, however, it's changed up a little bit. So the imminent wish is still a thing, but when the boss spawns in, the mini bosses, which there's one left and right of each side of the room, or the area, you get Biting Cold. The golden rule with Biting Cold, if you don't exactly know what you're doing with it, like if you're not used to the movement of getting to the wind, to the solar, to the pitchforks where the fire is, right? If you're not used to definitely getting there in time, then go on ×6. No matter what the situation is, when you're capping a spawn point, even if you haven't capped one of them or even both of them, you go at ×6 to refresh buff. That is the biggest tip I can give you. Go at ×6, because if you leave it at ×7, you can still get there by ×9/10. But if there's any hiccup at all, you hit your toe on the stairs, the boss boops you into a wall slightly. Anything like that at all, you're dead. And I don't fancy ever being a second away from dead. If you go at ×6, there's a room for any errors at all that might happen. It's an ogre boss fight. There's things that can happen. He boops you around. Go at ×6. So, a good example here, right? Get your mini boss weak first, because there's RNG when he spawns the trap. So prep him. Don't just wait and leave him at full HP, because if you leave him at full HP, right, and then wait until he does his trap, then DPS, you've lost time. Although it wouldn't matter too much, because the imminent wish timer is enough to cover both traps, even if you cap one at a time. You're still better off just doing what I've showed you. 3 fusion rifle shots with the strand fusion, with control burst, will get him a third HP. So get him a third HP, or even half. Then you can go down there and use your hammer and melt him, because you've got Simpercepts on. That's how you deal with the mini bosses. Don't go right. I have not seen one single video who uses the right mini boss. Only ever use left. Why? Because the right one is just awkward. He spawns his trap slot different to the left one. Just go with the left. Routine over anything else, right? I'm sure you can get a routine going on right, but why should I learn right when I've already learned left? And there's no incentive to go and do right, unless you were to cap free, free points to then get orbs quicker. Well, you're doing 2 rounds of this anyways, so don't worry about it. 2 waves, you get 2 orbs in middle per phase, obviously. In actual fact, I've screwed up on this phase, have I? Oh no, I've just dunked an orb. Later on in the fight, I actually do end up screwing up, which you'll see. I'll point that out when he comes up. Not that I'm screwing up, just that I end up doing too much damage to a Scorn boss. That's what ends up happening. So dunk your 3 orbs. Now I've got also a routine for this. Right, I'm methodical with this fight. I actually really like this fight. I work. So let's say that I'm facing the boss now. I work anti-clockwise. Right? So I start far left, then go bottom left, bottom right, top right. That is my routine for DPS. So I dunk, naturally you would dunk your last orb where you start, obviously. So that is also predetermined. You need to predetermine all this stuff. Don't just randomly start bottom left and go bottom right and all this sort of stuff and then do it a different way on the second time you do it. Do your DPS the same every time. This will stop errors occurring. So DPS, this is instructions. Dragon's Breath, Throne Hammer, super. Surge Switch beforehand, obviously that's Paragale Gauntlet, super that. And then just use Scatter Signal. Maybe do another rocket halfway through the DPS phase of the first plate. Maybe. But really focus on the fusion rifle shots because that's going to get you your super energy back. You actually want to sort of farm super whilst you're DPS. So, I hope I do it on this phase. I think I do. So, rocket, fusion rifle, as much as you can. Another rocket. Right, because obviously Dragon's Breath reloads itself generally. There's a lot of thrall on me, so I'm going to lose a bit of damage here, but that's fine. Sometimes you've got to play your life. The way I do this is set up for a very, very easy free phase. Very easy solo free phase. You can mess up and still get it. You can't mess up too much. Like if you mess up a plate of damage completely, then you might, maybe 2 plates. If you mess up 2 plates, you'll lose the free phase. So you can afford to mess up a little bit, but not too much. So I've run out of fusion rifle ammo here, but I've got ammo off the floor. I'm 90% to my super. I hope I do get it on this. I'm sure I do. This is my first time watching it back. So we debuff. Actually, we didn't debuff. I missed my hammer. So that was actually kind of bad. So we messed up damage a little bit, but we got our super for the final plate, which got us past past the letter G. When I get past the letter G on his HP, I know that I've done good enough, but not brilliant. That damage right there wasn't brilliant for me, because I've run this a couple of times to know that, okay, that was really mediocre. Some mistakes, not firing enough fusion rifle shots off, thrall in my way, routine was sort of slightly off, but good enough. And what made it good enough was that I got that second super on plate 4 to save and salvage the damage, which is good enough on a run like this. What you're going to understand is on solo flawless runs, maybe it's nerves, maybe it's anxiety for people, maybe for even someone like me, sometimes. You sometimes mess up on what you intend to do. And that's another thing as well that does happen. Especially when you don't play a lot. I don't play D2 a lot, and I find that when I come back to the game, because I've been playing other games, that I sort of lose a little skill. Inevitably you will. To be good at D2, you've got to play it all the time, whether you like it or not. And I haven't, you know, I can go on record and say I haven't liked D2 for a bit now. So it's meant that I haven't played it a lot. But I pay a cost to that, and the cost is that when I do come back on, I'm not as good as I should be when I'm generally playing. This is a bit of an issue. But it's that old paradox. We are all in this paradox of, well, not we all are, but D2 content creators are. Right, well, even if you're fed up with the game, you still got to play it. Right, to keep that YouTube growth going, to keep your skill up, especially for a solo PvE player. This will be the same, will be true for PvP players at the higher end. Inevitably, you've just got to keep going, but it's we just find it difficult to do so because file shape got delayed. And yeah, people are saying, yeah, let's just delay. But to me, the way I look at it is, yeah, they maybe did need to delay, but it's a huge nuisance to me that it is delayed. I don't care if there's problems. I'm a consumer of the game. And it's a huge nuisance to me, especially at the where I am with content creation. I'm sort of like small to medium size, and I'm not really going anywhere because the game's going nowhere. So I can't grow. I'm not pre-established like Astacross or Datto. They're pre-established people. They can salvage a lot of views off just doing anything. Stream highlights. They can play Helldivers 2. They can do what they want. I can't do what I want. Not at the minute. So if D2's in a bad spot, then my channel's sort of just living. That's all it really is doing. So it's sort of a nuisance to me at the minute that file shape has. We've got this massive gap and there's nothing to fill it. And the quests off Marasov and all that stuff and getting red border raid weapon quest line isn't going to be anything for me to make a video about for you. So it's really difficult, as I say, and I'm also sort of not playing D2, I'm playing Warframe. I'm starting to really get into Warframe, but I just need to figure out if Warframe's going to be a game that people are going to come to play. It's launching on iOS on the 20th of Feb, right? So the Warframe's actually in its best spot it's ever been this year, right? And as I say, I'm really into it. I really love it. I really love the game. I think it's fantastic. But I think that's for a video for another day. But yeah, with D2, I'm not playing it a lot. So you will see some plays where it's like questionable, and it will be because I'm not really playing. I'll have done this solo flawless and then logged off the game and not play anything else. Like in the game, just knock it off and then go and play something else because there's nothing to do for me. A tip about this fight: make sure that you constantly taking down the taken acolytes, especially once you've got your 4 orbs. When you've got your 4 orbs up top, come down to here. This is a really good zone to fight from, and they are the answer to ammo for DPS. You're gonna need more than 20 fusion rifle shots. Okay, you're gonna need ammo per plate to get that damage up, right? The solo free phase is easy, but if you haven't got the ammo there, Dragon's Breath won't do it on its own. Remember, Dragon's Breath is Anarchy, damage over time weapon. You are not meant to spam this weapon back to back. I see people still doing that in videos now. I'm like, why are you doing that? It's not that type of weapon. It's a one-shot weapon to then pair with a special weapon, like a fusion rifle or even a sniper, depending on what you're doing and what boss fight you're up against. Which, moreover, why are people not using snipers on this boss fight or linears? Right, well, it's accessibility. That old thing that people don't really seem to understand. But certain bosses are more suited to other special weapons. So just because a special weapon might be in the meta doesn't mean that it's always the meta for that particular boss fight. So this boss is suited to fusion rifle. Why? Because he knocks you back. Crits are a nightmare for him, for you to get the crits, right? So it's better just to put on something like a rocket fusion because there's no thought process behind that. The only thought process is intellect. Looking at your super for plate 4, that is the only thing where I'm like, am I going to get my super? That's the only thing that's going into it. I wouldn't use a kinetic tremor sniper against him because it would just be a waste of time to do so because of how this boss fight works. But if we are up against a boss that's weakened to crit damage, well, not weakened, but favourable to use crits, then I'm going to put that sniper on all day. I'm going to put that linear fusion on, right? So you've got to look at your accessible weapons for the boss fight. It's not always just a case of use the meta weapon. It just depends. So same routine as what I told you just before for the loadout, for the DPS rotation. I've already explained it. But obviously try and focus on the fusion rifle as much as possible, as I say. And take your time between plates. This is like Callus, Leviathan. You do get biting cold, right? So if that does get to 6, 7, 8, you need to get in that circle. But you can delay it a little bit. This will help you to definitely get your super. Whatever you do, I don't want you stacking for intellect. So if somebody comments saying I stacked for intellect and I get my super for play 4, don't do it. If you do it, I will argue with you about it. That's a pet peeve of mine. Never ever spec for intellect in PvE. Since the change 2 years ago or whatever it was, this is no longer the case. You should obviously definitely be specking for high resilience and high discipline on a Titan and get some recovery in there. My stat distribution on this particular Titan wasn't that good because I wasn't wearing my best Titan, my best armor set for my Titan. For whatever reason, I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't be bothered to organise all that and I just wanted to sort of get a run done and get a video out. That was it. So this damage is fire. We've done a lot of damage on that. So this rotation was better than rotation 1 for damage. So that's how your damage should go. And it will be even higher if you had the scatter signal with the 16 shots with no reload. Spam Dragon's Breath as well, because you get Vex Minotaurs that spawn every wave. So I like to do this. I do like to use a shot or two. Because if you leave them up during DPS, it stands to reason that you're going to mess up your DPS because of the Minotaur. He's going to come and melee you. You're going to get flinched off him. It's just going to be a nuisance. So eliminate anything that would put you off. Taken Acolytes would also do this. But you'll see that I actually do my rotation so that my damage rotation starts after Taken Acolytes are killed. So once I've done 3 orbs, I will wait for an Acolytes wave. Yeah, kill him, because it's more ammo on the floor anyways. Right, which I recommend you do try and stockpile some ammo in mid. Just makes it a little bit more consistent. And then it just makes things, you know, it means during DPS they don't spawn up, because Taken Acolytes are infinite. And they're on a timer. They'll be it's probably 45 seconds. It's probably the same spawn timer as Acolytes are on Ghost of the Deep. I would be willing to bet, but I haven't timed that. I could go and time that right now if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I have a feel for it. Which, that's another thing as well, is that in D2 you've got your numbers, you've got your damage numbers, you've got what things do on paper. Right? This weapon does this thing on paper. Right? This weapon's technically best in slot if you do this. If you make a wish and it happens. I'm joking, of course, but when you're looking at damage numbers on an Excel report, this doesn't take into account of accessibility at all. And in solo gameplay, sometimes accessibility will, actually most of the time, it does win over the most damage that you could do. You can seek out for the absolute best DPS build and do it like that. It just depends on what the situation is, right? So technically we could go with 4th Horseman. That's got really good DPS. But why the hell would we use 4th Horseman against this boss, this Ogre boss? He's going to push us back. So you see how, yeah, 4th Horseman will be fantastic. But on another hand, it won't be on a solo, right? Because it's going to lead to all sorts of problems. So you've got to be sensible as well, and then settle for a lower damage. It's damage versus accessibility. And your Dragon's Breath is very accessible. And its damage is exceptional as well. There's actually no drawbacks to Dragon's Breath. It's fantastic. So that's what you've got to think about at times, right? Is accessibility. And I know I'm saying it for just this fight, and it seems obvious what you would run. But you say that, but I see people on day 1 content of new activities, and they run the wrong stuff. Or they don't realise quick enough, oh, I should be using this weapon, I should be using Lament for this. They don't cotton on quick enough. They're like using some wrong loadout for like all day. And there's no videos on that new activity because it come out that day. And they're like, how do I do this? Then they go on YouTube, look at the top solo players. How do I do this? And then the top solo players already done it. And they're like confused as to why they've done it. Probably because the top solo players have a sense of accessibility for the activity. They also have an idea of your damage numbers and all that stuff. But they also understand that we don't live in a perfect world, and sometimes you do need to go with more of an accessible loadout just to get the job done, as opposed to being fancy about it, right? So that's what people need to start thinking about a little bit more, and think more about your play style. Not everyone's got the same play style. Everyone's a little bit different. Not this season because it's solo, but if you were to take away all these artifact mods and, you know, play properly, everyone's got actually a little bit of a unique playstyle. It's not that much different because Destiny 2 has become standardized, and there's not much flavor to it now, really. It's your builds are your playstyle, not you. Whereas, in my opinion, it used to be more you with the playstyle. I had a unique playstyle with my Better Devils and my Manannan and my Warcleave Coil. The way I done things then, as opposed to now, right? If I use Solar 3.0 or Void 3.0 and just use the best fragments, best in slot, then my playstyle will look the same as someone else's. When in reality it isn't, if you don't use OP stuff. But part of that game now is sort of gone now, and it's more about survivability and ad control. Really, that's really where we are. Obviously, make sure you're swapping between your builds. So I'm back to stock and armor charges on the left hand side. If they're decaying, you haven't switched, have you? So it's pretty straightforward. We've got an acolyte phase here, so we're going to take them out. Of course, the eyes as well. Make sure that you prep the acolyte eyes, right? So I would leave 2 up, because sometimes the scorn can kill the eyes, and then the biting cold starts when you don't realise. So be careful of that. So just leave 2 eyes up. Don't leave them all up, because then they're going to get in your way. And also, before you go to DPS, make sure you're full on ammo. Obviously, right, for your stuff, because then you're going to want to pick up more ammo when you get into mid. So we're on our final phase. We've done our surge switch. I've really went over this boss fight. I don't think there's any other tips I can really give you. Just make sure that you do debuff the boss right away with your hammer. The downside to the Titan as opposed to a Warlock, or maybe even a Hunter, is that your melee ability, you can't get it back good enough. Like, not as good as the Warlock, in my opinion. With the Dawn Chorus and getting your Celestial Fire melee back, because it's a hammer and you've got to throw it at him to get that damage, because if you don't, you will lose some. You've got to have a debuffed Paragil Burn 'em all super on him, right, to really push the damage. Whereas the Warlock does promote a lot more damage on this boss fight. So if I was to compare the two, I would say that, and I have seen some Hunter clips. I haven't even played this dungeon on a Hunter yet, but I have seen some clips of like crazy Blade Barrage stuff, and then there's Nighthawk on the final boss, how crazy that is. So the Titan's actually the worst class for the dungeon, in my opinion, because his damage output is just less than the other two. He's got the survivability, but they've all got survivability, let's be honest, right? They've all got the restoration. So that's that boss fight done with. Like I said, I'm cutting out the traversal section, so we'll get right onto the final boss fight. So this is the icing on top. This is the difference. This is the different aspect to the video, is that I'm using some sort of different weapon. And we're using another damage over time weapon, which is Anarchy. So when I play tested with Anarchy in this, because Anarchy has been in a decent spot for ages now. It hasn't been meta defining after its nerf and its ammo nerf. It went from 26 to 16. But it is decent now because there's more special weapons that are doing more damage output now. Like Scatter Signal and Supremacy. So this is intrinsically, passively buffed Anarchy. Anarchy damage rotations are better now than what they were, because special weapons have actually gotten a bit more of a power creep. So this means that it's actually more useful, and I believe there's a heavy GL buff coming. I haven't read the tweet or whatever, but I believe there is, right? So if this is going to affect Anarchy, then Anarchy's back in a meta-defining role again. But like I said, with this run itself, you will see that we do fantastic damage. So we're going to stick the left mini boss that spawns, right? We'll get a healing aid down here because the scorn traps are not favourable to me because they're not overlapped, which that is a cost saving, and that happens. Try and blind your captains with a tower and barricade, and transfer your melee, of course. Now, one or two people have told me that. Well, I'll go on to that in a minute. I'll do my loadout switch now. So we're going to do 2 Anarchy, debuff, super, right away. A Sunspot will spawn, so I should survive. That was quite ropey. There is a better strat of doing that. You can go all the way on the right side of the map behind a wall thing, which is generally what I do. But I was impatient to not do that, which nearly cost me a death. So be patient with your stuff. So if you think, going behind a wall and then doing that, do it. Especially if there's still sounds alive. So if the what was I saying now? we're just going to go to our loadout swap, get rid of our armor charges. Ammo as well on each plate will remain, right, which we'll go into when we get to the actual boss fight, like the actual DPS phase. Because what we're doing now is not actually DPS, really. It's just getting up the platforms, which is 3 main platforms, and then the 4 platforms you DPS. Take out the wizards as soon as, when you can. So we've got a restoration chain going. You can use a bit of your hammer, by all means go in. Just bear in mind, the boss does hit quite hard. So I opted, like right there, I opted for a different resistance, I think, as opposed to the Warlock. I think I went double arc concussive. I found that's actually not as good. What's the better resistance is arc resist, avoid resist, and a concussive dampener. Because the void resist actually helps out quite somewhat against the boss. So we're going to farm up the super, of course. We need to do that. We've got a harmonic siphon on for that. You could run heavy-handed. I know it's been nerfed and it's got that cooldown or whatever. But you can do that if you want. But I focused more on incandescent with these hand cannon, just taking them out quickly rather than going over there, meleeing them and stuff. Then I'm out of position. What I'm doing is I'm trying to get a sweet spot between the silent phases, because obviously they're unlimited, but if you kill them quickly, you get a little bit of time. Then we'll kill the blights on the boss. Obviously it's the mechanics as what it was at the ogre fight. With the mini ogre, with the mini boss. We're going to stick him with Anarchy first. Wait for him to spawn. You must wait for him to spawn that trap. I mean, if you don't, what you can do is just settle for 6 seconds DPS as opposed to 10 or 11, right? So it's gonna mean that you lose damage. So if you only capture one trap, then if it means that if it means avoiding a death, then just cap one trap. We surge switch. We're going to do two Anarchy, debuff with hammer, and then super. I don't know where the hammer went there, but just do our damage. If you get close to the C, I believe after this phase, if you get past the C for damage, you've generally done well. So what's happening there is we're using our Roman super hammer of soul with Symphoceps, because Scions spawn as DPS starts. See, there's 2 different Scion waves, so you use your unlimited Scion wave, but then there's extra wave that spawns during DPS, and they spawn all the time. That's an independent spawner, an independent spawn. But we can use those for surrounded on Symphoceps to buff our super. So the idea of this is just to use Anarchy and super. So I was thinking, what weapon can I stick this boss with to then super with the hammers? Because the problem with hammers is it takes so long to get it out that it's just a worse version of what Daybreak is on the Warlock. Because Daybreak does massive damage, right? But I was thinking, what's a good single shot damage type weapon, or maybe a damage over time weapon I can use? And obviously it's Dragon's Breath, right? But I was like, I don't want to use Dragon's Breath for this fight, because actually Dragon's Breath for this fight is kind of dangerous on the mini bosses, because now I've changed my strat to what I did on my first solo run, where I was killing them both with Dragon's Breath, right? I switched from that strat. Rather than doing that, wait for the mini boss to spawn in his second trap, right? In the hopes that the 2 traps overlap, that I can cap them, then get rid of debuff in one go, sort of thing. Anarchy helps with that, but see, Dragon's Breath, there's a chance of you dying. If you tag him and then you immediately stand in the trap to try and cap it, because naturally you want to save time, you might die from the splash damage from Dragon's Breath. And on a solo flawless, it's not ideal. So because I went from the different strat from not killing both mini bosses but just killing one, it was better to run some other weapon as opposed to Dragon's Breath, I feel. And that's what gave me the idea to run Anarchy in this. So I tested its damage and I was surprised. I was like, alright, this is actually doing decent. I know there is some favourable mods like Solo Operator You know, I'm going to get a debuff. I'm going to have Radiant, right? So it's coming into its own because that's what the first 3 plates are. They're just Anarchy and Super and debuff. But as I said to you before, because special weapons are getting more powerful now, this means Anarchy is also more powerful because of it, because of the damage rotation. Because on the main floor, we are gonna do Anarchy slash sniper rifle ammo damage, right? So I think that was just one trap that we did. So we actually still met the damage gate within 6 seconds. That's actually really good going to do that, because I think we missed a trap. So yeah, as I said, this loadout's good, and you won't die from Anarchy. You do take splash damage from it, but not like Dragon's Breath. I feel as though that I've loved Dragon's Breath since they brought it out, but I do think they're harsh with the self damage that it does to you. I don't know why. Like, why is it so harsh that it's killing you like that? Like, maybe it should do some initial splash damage, but not to the point of wiping you. A Dragon's Breath shot will actually kill you in a super, in a Roman super. Not any normal rocket will do this, but Dragon's Breath does, which is kind of crazy, really. So we're going to wait for debuff. So we're waiting for our melee ability. We've knocked on our surges. We're just going to do it for one of the plates. So 2 Anarchy, debuff, then all sniper damage. We might do another 2 Anarchy. I played it a little bit too cautious, to be honest. I should have pushed for damage a little bit more. But in the end, it didn't matter. It was an easy solo 2 phase, so it didn't matter. But for watchability, yeah, I should have pushed that plate a lot more than what I did watching it back. I'm going to let the surges switch out because right now I don't have full ammo, and I could start up plate 2 and just rely on the surge buff. But I think it's better, because I can't knock them on and off now. Once you activate it, that's it. It's better to maybe just call it a day for your armor surge. Go refill on a sniper armor full, because you can go to the prior plates. They don't despawn yet. They'll despawn later, but they won't despawn right now. So I can fill up on max sniper rifle ammo again, wait for debuff, and then do it for plate 2 of the final wave, which that's exactly what I'm doing. I've got outreach on my class piece for this so that I can use it. I do end up doing that at some points. So yeah, we do lose our armor charge, but it doesn't matter. We've got debuff and we got radiant. So if you're gonna push damage though, get a healing nade down like that. We're not killing the blights. I know that you can extend time by killing them, but this loadout doesn't promote that. It doesn't promote us doing that, because by the time you start shooting the blights, you will lose damage anyways. That would only work for a particular loadout that helps you to do such thing like Sunshot and stuff like this. I'm not using Sunshot. So it's really just to get my Anarchy damage in, probably 4 shots per plate, and then a decent amount of sniper rifle ammo. So we're just filling up on our ammo. The plates that despawn, they despawn the ammo along with them. Bear that in mind. Yeah? So if you are lowish on heavy, just remember the bricks that you had. And I'm on about on every plate that we've already done so far, that they exist. The only plate that does stay up is the first one. So if there is ammo on that plate, it will stay there. But the other plates, the ammo disappears. So you may as well make use of that green, those green bricks. And that heavy, you may as well. Same thing again, 2 Anarchy, all sniper. We'll do a healing nade mid damage for safety, right? It's just a safety precaution, right? It isn't going to be max damage, right? It isn't as much damage as I could have done, but look at his HP. He's half HP. So I'm settling. You've got to know when to settle for damage and when not, and when it's a problem to you. So this is my philosophy on it for dungeon bosses. This is particularly for dungeons for solos. If you can optimize damage and change a boss fight from a 3 phase to a 2 phase, or from a 4 phase to a 3 phase, and there's a low risk of you dying if you optimize such strats, then you do it. Because this will overall reduce risk of death, because it means you're doing one less phase. Therefore, there's less to go wrong. You lose less stamina as well. You've got stamina that plays into it, because you go on and doing the run, and you're 50 minutes into it solo flawless, and you're getting tired, and then you make a mistake. Whereas if you can predetermine all your damage, I do that with all my runs. I'll predetermine all my damage and what I'm going to do. Right? So if you can do such things and really optimize your damage without being too risky, then you do it. There's a balance. If you play too passive and not do enough damage on certain dungeon bosses, you get punished severely. Ghost of the Deep is a prime example of this. You will severely get punished because it's 8 minutes per phase. Yeah? Now, I know that this dungeon right now isn't like that, but you need to understand all these different mini playstyles within all the dungeons that we have. You can't just say, well, oh, it's only I'm good at this one, but I'm not good at that dungeon. No, you should be good at all of them. That's the answer, not just to be good at one. This dungeon focuses heavily on burst damage, so if you're somebody that's good at that, maybe actually sort of more speedrunner type people, then they're going to excel the most at that, right? If you're a player that sits back quite a lot, this isn't going to be. It's not going to be in your court as much, but I will say it's very quick to get to damage, so it's no big deal if you don't do the damage, right? As long as you, I would recommend at least hit the damage gate that it shows you on this HP bar. Make sure that you're hitting that, because if you're not, you need to do another wave on this floor. This was quite close, so I was playing it quite risky, but there was some silence up to use my hammer. That's the nature of the game, I'll be honest. If you watch anyone's footage, you'll see, you know, they're going in the red, they're going out of the red. That's what this dungeon's about. It's based on you having restoration. They have balanced the whole dungeon around you have, in my opinion, either having devour or restoration. So it's based around void and solar, the dungeon. Mind the gun, the exotic from this dungeon does grant you devour. So they're almost telling you, hey, this dungeon's got lots of enemies. If you're not on solar and you're not on void, then use the crossbow for devour, and then you can do it on stasis if you want. And I've seen people do that, which is actually quite clever. I haven't really used the new void exotic. I haven't got catalyst for it either, so I don't really know much about it. I do know it grants devour, and it opens builds up on other elements that don't have healing, which is good. And as I said, there's a room to make a video about that. But for the most part, that's what it's based on. It's based on you having healing, right? So if you're not running a healing build and you don't have a weapon on that gives you healing, then the dungeon's not fun. It's possible to do it with no healing and make a challenge of it, but it's not how the dungeon should be played. It's not designed for that. We do unlimited waves here and there and all that. It's going to be very interesting now how this dungeon ages, and I don't think it's going to age that good, because we've had it so good this season with the solo operator and the solar mods. I think after Final Shape, this dungeon's going to go down in replayability, because these bosses are tanky. This boss isn't, but the first two are. Without solo, you try doing it without solo operator, you will notice that it's a hell of a lot different. Probably this fight will be a bit different as well. Not as bad, you know, not as bad. If you get a good linear or a good sniper on, you'll melt this boss, but you're going to have to think more about your buffs a bit more after this season. But that's months away, and no one cares about them. It only seems to be me that cares about stuff like that, like the you know, the replayability of dungeons, which we should be thinking about, but no one is, because no one's really thinking about them. They're just thinking about Final Shape and what that's going to be like, which I can understand. We're going to take the right side mini boss. I don't take the one over there. Why? Because there's cover on right. So why would I go all the way to the left side to deal with a more difficult captain? The barricade works so good for this. So if you are on Titan doing this, don't run rally. It's a huge mistake if you run rally. You're looking to zone enemies out of your way. You're looking for zone control, and the tower and barricade does that. Right? It's not going to give you the reload that rally does, but we don't need the reload. Think about it. What do we need reload for? We've got loaders. We've got all that stuff. We're not bothered. The tower and utility is so good, and I think it would help out a lot of Titans who are doing this. So always switch back to your standard healthy finisher setup, so that you can then do your armor charge switches, of course. So the damage is looking really good. Bear in mind, we're only on phase 2 here, right? And we've got another plate, and then we have our main DPS. So we're well ahead on damage. So this just goes to show it's top marks for Anarchy in this. I would say Anarchy is actually better than Dragon's Breath for this fight. It would actually be good for the Ogre fight. I haven't tested it on him. You know, obviously I could have done a full Anarchy run if I wanted to. I didn't, but I could have. But that would require me to go and test those bosses, make sure that damage is good enough for a video and stuff. And maybe, you know, like I couldn't be bothered with that. But I did really want to test it for this fight. Always start with a healing aid as well, or whatever restoration you build you're working on when you start a fresh play, to kill the wizards, to make sure that your health's going and stuff, and keep in check on your scions. Make sure you got a good primary, of course. I'm using this hand cannon integration, or whatever it's called. Anyone can get it. I know that there's the King's Fall hand cannon, Zaoli's Bane or hand cannon, whatever it's called, right? Don't ask me to pronounce it again. Whatever hand cannon that's called, you can use that. It's crafted. It's got enhanced incandescent and stuff, and explosive payload, which is the best solar hand cannon in the game probably. But this one's a stock loadout for somebody who doesn't have it, who doesn't have a good solar hand cannon, because there's not a lot of solar hand cannon legendary wise in this game. So I've noticed that, because obviously, you know, it's important, solar weapons, and this fight, in my opinion, hand cannons are just the best. Either that or SMGs, but you're gonna find with like running a mini tool that you're gonna struggle to shoot the eyes a little bit. You're gonna have to risk your life a little bit more, push up to where the boss is. Hand cannon, you can take them from a range, and because of the hand cannon buff that we got, they just do too much damage to pass up. So yeah, mini tool will work, but it'll have its limitations, I think, for when you're fighting the eyes and stuff. So this is where we it was this wave I think we messed up. So yeah, I settled to only get 1 point because I killed the boss too soon, right? But we do meet the damage gate in the 6 seconds, so you still can. But my power level is really high, which you can cap out your damage at 1830. I think I'm 1829, so that is helping me quite a lot. But we do just pay attention to the HP bar. We only just get it past. But if we didn't, it wouldn't have been a big deal, because we would have actually got an extra free damage round to do damage to him. So there's a lot of possibilities with this boss on what you can and can't do. On what you can do mainly. So that's why I like it a lot, because it's different. It's not. This is what people have been talking about, where, you know, a lot of the formula for bosses is the same. Well, this boss is a different formula, right? It's got levels, and the whole level design is based around him and how much damage you do to him and stuff. I think it's top marks. I think it's good. I don't think it's the level of Prophecy, Kel Echo. Like that damage round is like the best damage round probably in all of Destiny 2. Like for when it came out and the impact it made. But this is like up there in like top 3 encounters to solo in terms of like fun factor and stuff. But it's good. It's something different. And that's all we ask for. So you should reward Bungie when they do something different. You should say, fair play, you're doing something different there, and it worked. That's good. Don't always bash them. You need to reward them when they've done something good as well, because then they never know when they've done good or bad. And then that's why we're getting messages that we're in now. So it's a very well made encounter. The boss isn't too tanky. It's revolving around burst damage. You can really optimize your damage and be rewarded for that, meaning that you do less phases. But on the other hand, if you don't do the damage, you're only ever 2 minutes away from a damage rotation, so it doesn't feel too bad to play. The only thing people have mentioned is that you've got to farm up supers solo, and you do a little bit to be safe. But supers nowadays with your siphon mods, you're getting a super in no time. In like 90 seconds, you're getting a super. So it's no big deal to farm up a super. The scions are unlimited. You're getting them all the time. I think we're going to push him to final stand on this next wave. Because, just to get it over with, just to get the final stand. We've got max Anarchy, max Sniper Rifle. We've got a debuff hammer. So we'll go and use that. Same damage rotation as what I've been doing. We'll push him all the way. And then obviously it's final stand. I felt as though, I don't know, the eyes seem to have spread out quite a bit. As opposed to last time I've done this. They seem to be wider so that they can hit you more often. So you've got to be careful on this. It is final standing. It isn't too bad, but you can be caught off guard with it. I just used Anarchy, just sat behind the wall. There's strats you can do. You can equip Polaris Lance, because stuff like that if you want. But I don't recommend sustained fire against him, because the eyes will melt you unless you've got restoration going, which I'm really waiting on a nade right now. That's what I'm really banking on. I've nearly got my nade now. Anarchy's really doing the work at the end, and I've got 6 shots, which is quite a lot. Just keep killing some eyes and let Anarchy do the work. I have got some sniper rifle shots, but I wasn't fussed about using it. Like, the boss is just about dead now anyways. If you do get a super, then definitely use it, because it'll actually end up melting them. That was a Soul Falls for this on a Titan. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.